Hello there, campy campers. Mr. Are They Gay here with another episode of Projection. Hope you're doing homosexually. You do know the password for this week's homosexual agenda meeting, don't you? Oh, you forgot it again? That happens to you often, huh? Well, you're in luck, because this video is sponsored by NordPass. Do you ever go to log into a website to do something gay, like listen to Mitski on Spotify, but you forgot your password, so then you have to try all the variations of your usual password, but it doesn't work. So you give up and try to reset your password, so then you send the password reset email, but you made the Spotify account with an email you haven't used in 3 years, so you try to log into that email, but you forgot the password, so you try to log into the password email, but you didn't send the email, but it doesn't work, so you go. What if I told you that your fears of being logged out of the accounts that are essential to the functioning of your everyday life isn't a problem anymore? What if you could store all of your passwords in one place while only having to remember one master password? Well, you can with NordPass, a password manager that can generate ultra-secure passwords for every site you visit and then store and organize them securely. Brought to you by the cybersecurity experts at NordVPN, NordPass not only stores passwords, but also autofill information to save time filling out forms, credit card information to make shopping super easy. And there's so many more awesome features. Instead of letting web browsers like Google Chrome handle this sensitive information, you can trust NordPass to store your information, nice and encrypted, safe and secure, insured by experts in digital privacy. Plus, you can use NordPass beyond just one browser. Use it on multiple devices. And to seal the deal, let me offer you something special. Go to nordpass.com/aretheygay and use code ARETHEYGAY for 70% off a 2-year NordPass premium plan. Plus, you get 1 additional month for free. This is a limited time offer, so act fast. Once again, that's nordpass.com/aretheygay using code ARETHEYGAY. So I recently rewatched Dead Poets Society, and just like Ellen, I found it very problematic, but also very gay. But beyond the explicit homoeroticism, how did I actually know it was gay? How do I know anything's gay? First, let me remind you what Dead Poets Society is, and also, spoiler alert. Basically, it's a movie about a really rich, conservative, and prestigious all-boys high school set in the year 1959. So basically, the gayest scenario. Also, hey, totally random, 2 of the characters, Neil and Todd, love being close to each other. That's funny. Do you think they, Robin Williams plays the new English teacher and alumni of the school, Mr. Keating. He uses unorthodox teaching methods to teach the boys about the homosexual agenda. Teach the boys about poetry. The same thing. He's super inspirational and challenges the students to think about the conflict between tradition and nonconformity throughout the movie. I wonder if that's a metaphor. Don't worry about it. Anyways, a particular group of boys go on to continue this tradition that Mr. Keating had when he was a student at the school, called the Dead Poets Society. Basically, they sit around in a dark cave in a circle full of jerks just like the Beatles, and they read poetry together. Whoa! Is that an individual's newfound appreciation for self-determination that I hear? Oh, it's coming from the gay one. Mr. Keating inspires one of the guys, Neil, to follow his dreams in the homosexual agenda. Sorry, again, I meant follow his dreams in theater. Same thing. Anyways, it doesn't work out because his dad is homophobic and Neil takes his own life, Mr. Keating gets fired, and we all learn a valuable lesson. Don't follow your dreams? So let's talk about it. One of the most frequent questions I get regarding my videos is about my method. How do I go about analyzing media for queerness? So today we're going to analyze Dead Poets Society and use it as a framing device for going over the method. The Are They Gay method. Now, the Are They Gay method isn't just one of the many things I pull out of my asshole. Essentially, what I do is formally organize the methods that you queers at home do all the time on your own. Analyzing texts for queerness simply involves a conscious awareness of the shared cultural meanings queer people have been identifying with for hundreds of years. For example, how did we all come away knowing Miss Frizzle was a lesbian? You just know. Queer people are really good at picking up on some mysterious aura of queerness that seems to exist, no matter what that aura is connected to. Miss Frizzle didn't have to say she was really into folk music for us to know that she was a lesbian. We just knew. And I'm not saying queer people are born with some supernatural abilities. It's just a product of how our shared identities interact and play off the social world in a similar way. So if there aren't explicit mentions of queerness or non-heterosexual lip collisions, how do we analyze queerness in media? Let me separate the analysis of non-explicit queerness into 3 sub-methods. Queerness in structure, or reading above the text. Now, what I mean by reading above the text is looking at the structure of a story for queer aspects. There may be larger metaphors that unite the whole text under a queer umbrella. Frozen is a classic example. It feels really gay because Elsa's whole conundrum of being a secret sapphic ice queen can be very easily read as a metaphor for coming out and queerness. Another example, the recent Pixar movie Luca. The whole monster thing is clearly a metaphor for queerness. Or so I've heard some very sexy Mexican Venezuelan men argue. Even if writers don't intend for their metaphors to be queer, I think we can at least agree that some metaphors are gayer than others. Metaphors about being oppressed or targeted for some characteristic or identity you hold, a little gayer than other ones, right? Stories that mirror the queer experience. Stories involving an oppressed group who hides in the shadows, themes of tradition versus nonconformity, or stories with characters embracing a part of themselves that they were previously ashamed of. Classic gay metaphors. So what's the second part of the Are They Gay method? Queerness in culture, reading out of the text. Why is it important that Ryan from High School Musical loves theater and fashion? Well, those signals tell us something. Even though we never see Ryan come out, from these interests, we somehow know he's probably gay. Now, we have to be careful with this one because what's the difference between playing into or even celebrating harmful stereotypes versus picking up on the ways queer people have historically expressed themselves? It's difficult, but I can outline what I think is the good version of this type of cultural referencing. Queer culture exists. There's no one on this earth who can neatly draw a line around what exactly that is, but there's certainly like a general blob of understanding, consciously and subconsciously, that queer people have about themselves and their place in the world. Sometimes that overlaps with stereotypes, but positive shared experiences that queer people use to define themselves are meaningfully different than negative views imposed by outsiders. Yes, lots of gay people like theater. I like theater. I admit it. It's true. Yet, even if others say bad things about how gays love fashion or theater or quiches, it's our right to redefine and reclaim those signifiers as a testament to our strength as a community. For example, the director of the previously mentioned High School Musical is actually a gay man. Rather than viewing his character Ryan as a gay stereotype in human form, he thought of his characterization of Ryan as a continuation of queer aesthetics. He used those queer aesthetics to, quote, make choices that I felt those who were watching would grab. They would see it, they would feel it, they would know it, and they would identify with it. That is what happened. So next time you see a wink wink nudge nudge Walt Whitman reference or Friends of Dorothy, you can be sure there's at least something gay about it. And that's okay. And now our final part of the method. Queerness as action. Reading below the text. Wow, those gentlemen are quite close to each other. Hey, he just smelled him. Is it just me, or is that a little, you know? So this method is a little more straightforward. Or gay backwards. Or let's just say, if you can replace one of your fictional characters in a same-gender relationship with a person of the opposite gender, and tell that same story between a man and a woman, and at the end of it, foresee a possibility in which they get together, then there's just enough tension for it to possibly be a love story. Now, not all smells or homoerotic invasions of personal space are gay. Some gay actions aren't necessarily charged with gay intentions. I've literally been to a gay bar and I've never seen men slap each other on the ass more than in a high school locker room. And at least 80% of those slaps didn't have any gay intentions, so what gives? How can we label a certain action or relationship as gay when we know relationships and actions are complicated? Well, it's contextual. When we analyze fiction, we might consider why the author put something there. Arm pats, stares, and bisexual lighting are put into text for reasons. On the other hand, it's also good to think about why the author didn't put something there. Why have all of this tension and then have no kiss? Why can't this pining stare be called romantic when this pining stare is? It's fiction, right? So it's not like we're describing objective reality with unalterable laws. If you can reasonably argue that a romantic aura makes sense as an audience member, then it makes sense. Alright, so now that we've gone over the 3 sub-methods, let's bring it back to the main point. You can use these methods in a variety of ways. Oftentimes, they're complementary. There could be metaphors supported by gay cultural references that hint at the romance between 2 characters. The possibilities are endless. Let me remind you, you can't use these methods to say that something is gay or not gay with certainty. All you can do is argue why it can be gay. Cultural meanings aren't fixed in space, and our conclusions shouldn't pretend that they are. These meanings are unstable, flexible, and always changing. But once they're back in queer people's hands, well, that's when the magic happens. So let's take these bad boys out for a spin. Let's try and use the Are They Gay method on Dead Poet Society to see just how gay it is. And before you get all pissed off about reading too much into work or imposing agendas, let me remind you of the entire ethos of Dead Poet Society.
Now, when you read, don't just consider what the author thinks. Consider what you think.
The movie teaches us to think deeply about texts and participate in the creation of their meaning. If it's gay, let it be gay. So open your mind, your hearts, and your heterosexual relationships. It's about to get gay. Let's start with something obvious, the metaphor. One of the main conflicts in this story involves the conflict between tradition and nonconformity. On the one hand, we have the school, the strict parents, societal expectations, patriarchal attitudes, and on the other, free expression, art, poetry, theater, and so on. There's many ways to read this, obviously, but it fits pretty well to interpret the story as a conflict between heteronormativity and homosexuality, especially when thinking about Neil and Todd's character arcs. The movie opens with these banners reading, tradition, honor, discipline, excellence. And I don't mean to microaggress or anything, but that's the straightest thing I've ever heard. I mean, besides excellence, we gays are excellent at driving over curves. And like, tradition doesn't have to be homophobic, but the connotations of this mantra, in this setting, with this many white people, you just know these fruits won't fly. The pressures of heteronormative society become especially evident in setting up the characters Todd and Neil.
This is our youngest, Todd.
Mr. Anderson, you have some big shoes to fill, young man. Your brother was one of our finest. Neil, we expect great things from you this year.
Thank you, sir.
Well, he won't disappoint us.
Besides Neil's father looking like the caricature of every homophobic father mixed into one, it's obvious that these guys have a lot of weight on their shoulders. To be queer in 1959 in such a traditional setting with this much pressure, it's tough. And it accentuates the main narrative tension between tradition and nonconformity. Neil, the main gay of the story, is usually lively and free-spirited, but when his father's around, his father, the epitome of patriarchal heterosexual masculinity, Neil shrivels. He lets his father control every aspect of his life. The school, like a Supreme hoodie, is a straitjacket. But who will be the gay guiding light to show these young men the power of so-called alternative lifestyles? Mr. Keating. The new teacher in town represents the queering of the story, the nonconformity, the challenge to traditional conceptions.
And the human race is filled with passion. And medicine, law, business, engineering, these are noble pursuits and necessary to sustain life. But poetry, beauty, romance, love, these are what we stay alive for.
Tradition can have its place. Traditionally, people piss in bathrooms. That's probably a useful practice. But sometimes, there are arbitrary rules telling us who we can and can't love based on gender. As Mr. Keating says, these are the fights you stay alive for. He's subverting tradition, just like queer people have done throughout the ages. Is this movie an edible arrangement? Because it's literally just fruit. Mr. Keating's talks are inspiring, and, you can tell he's at least a friend of Dorothy.
We all have a great need for acceptance. But you must trust that your beliefs are unique, your own, even though others may think them odd or unpopular, even though the herd may go, that's bad.
So again, Mr. Keating is obviously challenging tradition and encouraging the guys to embrace and trust themselves, even if people think they're odd. And the boys take up the challenge. They find out Mr. Keating was a part of this thing called the Dead Poet Society. And well...
You mean it was a bunch of guys sitting around reading poetry?
No, Mr. Overstreet, it wasn't just guys. We weren't a Greek organization. We were romantics. We didn't just read poetry. We let it drip from our tongues like honey.
Just a bunch of guys being dudes, sitting around reading poetry. In 1959, that sort of thing is a little queer-coded. But surprisingly, the students don't think this queer-coded thing is a bad thing anymore. The students embrace the queer-coded aspects of themselves and go against heteronormative gender roles. Now, this doesn't mean that all the dudes in the Dead Poet Society are gay. You can be a totally comfortable heterosexual male and enjoy some poetry. But their actions pose a challenge to gender roles and homophobia in a way that may empower some queer members of the group to discover their identity. Anyways, Neil discovers that he's gay, and he tells his boyfriend Todd that he wants to be a theater actor, which we all know is a notoriously heterosexual profession. Mr. Keating, the gay light of the school, has inspired him.
For the first time in my whole life, I know what I want to do. And for the first time, I'm gonna do it! Whether my father wants me to or not!
In the queer version of this story, or as I like to call it, Dead Poet Society, Neil is becoming comfortable with his queer identity. His decision to audition for a play shows us that he feels confident and proud of who he is. But this liberation from societal expectations only lasts for so long. Neil gets outed eventually. His dad finds out that he's doing the whole theater thing.
I made a great many sacrifices to get you here, Neil. And you will not let me down.
And this so painfully mirrors what many queer sons have to go through. The weight of the world and patriarchal expectations is on their shoulders, and they feel like deep disappointments. And sure, I know people have extremely passionate attachments to their artistry, and many people can't live without pursuing their passions. I get that. But the way that Neil talks about his theater career makes it seem like there's something below the surface.
And you're acting for him, too. You're playing the part of the dutiful son. I know the son's impossible, but you have to talk to him. You have to show him who you are, what your heart is.
I'm trapped.
No, you're not.
It's just like, if I were watching some of these scenes out of context, I wouldn't think that this conversation's about him not being able to pursue theater. It's about something deeper. His sense of self, his identity, or in this reading, his queer identity. After speaking to his dad a bit, Neil eventually convinces him to at least let him perform in the play. It seems like it's going well. Neil is good in the play. He's proud of himself. He feels comfortable in his skin. He might even be coming to terms with his queer identity. But his father, this stern-looking man in the back of the theater, confronts him with a soul-killing conversation. And again, the talk they have doesn't seem to just be about theater. This homophobic man has just seen his gay son for the first time. And after forcefully extracting Neil in a rage, he says,
We're trying very hard to understand why it is that you insist on defying us. Whatever the reason, we're not going to let you ruin your life.
This seems like such an emotionally charged confrontation, and it clearly cuts at Neil's core. It almost seems like he's going to come out of the closet talking about how he feels.
And I am not going to let you
I've got to tell you what I feel!
What? Tell me what you feel! What is it?
But Neil doesn't see a way out. He can't go on any longer, and he takes his own life. Now, it may be a trope we see a lot in movies that the queer person always faces some tragedy at the end, and although there is an oversaturation of queer tragedies, a lot of the time these tragedies reflect reality. The feelings of hopelessness and despair Neil feels in the face of such a constraining society certainly parallels the feelings of queer people across time and space who have felt that in the face of homophobia. Put all together, it's easy to see why this story might be read as a queer metaphor. The conflict between tradition and nonconformity is a struggle queer people have had to deal with for a great deal of human history. While queer people don't have a monopoly on liberation and pride, or tragedy and hopelessness, there's certainly correlations between the way these themes are expressed in the movie and the way queer people express them in real life. In this way, Dead Poets Society is queer in a structural and inherent way. The theme, the ethos, the emotions, the parallels in the movie easily facilitate its interpretation as a queer metaphor. Consider it analyzed. Next! So, there's not as much in this movie in terms of aesthetics or allusions, but some of the central references in this movie are pretty gay. I think that most of the literary allusions and references act as a supplement to the main metaphor, mainly in emphasizing the queerness of nonconformity in this movie. For example, the first time Mr. Keating, local gay recruitment officer, shows up, he's singing Tchaikovsky. You know, notoriously gay composer Tchaikovsky. Of all the composers in the world, they chose Tchaikovsky. It's a small detail, but why Tchaikovsky? Why does he reference Tchaikovsky multiple times? Oh, I know why. It's gay. Oh, but you thought that was the only 19th century gay to be referenced. Well, look no further to Walt Whitman. There's so many references to Walt Whitman in this movie, you'd think that it was the gay kid trying to bullshit his participation grade in your freshman poetry seminar. But of course, what better way to express the homosexualism of Mr. Keating's metaphorical call to live freely and question tradition?
Captain, my captain.
Oh, and it's the Walt Whitman poem about the second gayest president, Abraham Lincoln. Alright, so you might think, hey, minor details, right? But think about this. Think about Mr. Keating's statements imploring us to think deeply about texts. In the context that this movie's ideas on liberation from tradition is a metaphor for queerness, what could it mean when the movie's core literary reference that supplements the main liberationist theme centers a very notoriously queer author? Oh. So there's romance in this movie. Todd and Neil. Let's talk about it. They're similar in the ways they interact with the structure of the movie. The whole metaphor thing hinges on Todd and Neil's experiences, especially Neil's, whose tastes deviate from the traditions we see so embedded into their world. The fact that Todd and Neil are at the emotional center of the queer metaphor and the movie, well, that should tell you one thing. Let me tell you a bit about these town gays. Todd's new to the school, and Neil's his new roommate. They have a casual meeting, look at each other's lips, and slowly, Todd gets integrated into Neil's friend group. But is there evidence that either of them are practicing queerosexuals? Let's talk about Neil. He's the heart of the queer metaphor. So just like Timothée Chalamet, his entire life is queer-coded. We talked a bit about how the conversations he had with his father and Mr. Keating suggested that there was something going on under the immediate text. So he's pretty gay, but what about Todd? Like I said before, Todd's also implicated in the gay metaphor. Todd's an awkward fish out of water, and he lives in contrast to Neil's charismatic and commanding attitude. Todd has a bit more internalized homophobia and therefore has trouble living up to Mr. Keating's expectations of subverting tradition. Neil acts as a representative of the homosexual agenda in these instances, trying to encourage Todd to do away with his fears.
Nothing Mr. Keating has to say means shit to you, does it, Todd?
But Todd can't escape his fears. He insists that he just isn't like that.
I'm not like you, all right? You say things and people listen. I'm not like that.
Mr. Keating even comments on Todd's demeanor, but in a quite way.
Mr. Anderson thinks that everything inside of him is worthless and embarrassing. Isn't that right, Todd? That's your worst fear.
And all these feelings of inadequacy, well, they're definitely not unique to the gay experience, obviously, but instead they mirror a specific type of negative shame that queer people feel about themselves when confronted with homophobia, both internal and external. And in the school, in this traditional context that feels like Mike Pence's wet dream, it's easy for queer people to connect to the specific type of worthless and embarrassing that Todd's going through. But Mr. Keating and Neil, in ways of gay, help Todd realize that he doesn't have to be ashamed of who he is. Neil and Todd especially grow to have a very close and positive relationship. Even when Todd is still this new and timid kid, Neil really wants Todd to join the Dead Poets Society. And it's very sweet and healthy, and he really respects Todd's boundaries while also standing very close to him and staring at him intently in the eyes.
Keating said that everybody took turns reading, and I don't want to do that. Gosh, you really have a problem with that, don't you? What if you didn't have to read? What if you just came and listened?
There are times where he pushes Todd into doing things that are out of his comfort zone, like reading in front of class or expressing himself more. He genuinely cares for Todd's well-being in a way his other friends and even his family don't. They understand each other on a totally different level.
I can take care of myself just fine, all right? No. I mean, no. No.
Now, I don't know about you, but that no was a little suggestive. Definitely one of the most emotionally charged no's I've heard in quite some time. And then in this same scene, there's more gay teasing. You know, the kind of teasing school kids engage in when they have a crush.
No. Give me, Neil, give that back.
You're dreaming of poetry. I mean, faced by Walt Whitman. Okay.
And through these gay escapades, Todd starts to feel more and more confident and more sure of himself. Neil is there to be a bro, homosexual. Like on Todd's birthday, it's sad boy hours because his parents sent him the same exact present from last year, and Neil finds him. And Neil tries to comfort him by throwing that shit over the bridge. It ends up being a bridge to their budding queerness. After Neil's death, of course, Todd is sad. Everyone is sad, but Todd's especially upset. He just lost his best friend. That is absolutely devastating, obviously. But Todd is exceptionally upset, and the movie makes it a point to make us aware of that. It is not gay to be sad. But the point I will make is that the movie makes it a point to display the specific depth of Todd's sadness, almost as if to make it clear that Todd and Neil's relationship was particularly special. Special in a romantic way? Well, that's up to you. Throughout the movie, with the stares, the awkward gay smiles, and relatable, uncomfortable moments of gay adolescence, it seems like a reasonable enough interpretation to say that Todd and Neil may be members of the agenda. And I get it. Maybe they're just bros. Maybe the romantic fire burning in their eyes was a spur-of-the-moment thing. Who hasn't had the urge to kiss the homies at least once? But let's make room for people to interpret these homosexuals in a different way. Sometimes stares are gay. Interpreting actions in fictions can go a million different ways, just like character sexualities. I've only presented the ways it can be gay. So, now what? Using the method, you have the skills to make that decision for yourself. Is there a metaphor lurking around the corner of your favorite piece of media? Is there an oddly specific reference only you and your Doc Martens wearing bisexuals understand? Are people looking at each other's lips in romantic lighting? Through analyzing the structure of a story, the cultural meanings it pulls from, and the relationships between the characters, you can justify your claims to queerness in whatever fashion you'd like. Is Dead Poet Society gay? Is anything gay? Well, You decide.
Hey, gay. You want to act gaily daily? Well, here's a few ways you can do that. Support this channel by checking out my merch at www.itsall.gay or consider supporting me on Patreon. Also, remember to follow my Twitter, Tumblr, and Instagram. Don't forget to subscribe. Anyways, these are some people who are acting gaily daily. My patrons: Aurelia Chilinska, Rising Sun, Grackle, Kara, Duncan, Lorenzo J. Yanez Jr., Blue Lau, Queer Space Girl, Anarkali Ascari, Darren Mad, Victor, Delaney Broom, Elizabeth Acosta, Violet, Amara, Marine G. Boyer, E. J. Patrick, Evan P., Kebu, Steffi, Cece, Knights Who Say Sledge, Enar Dominguez Elvira, Anna Tchaikovska, Etienne, Jessica Carmona, Night Tripping Fairy, Testy Tara, Mickey McCommons, Nadine Ferres, Leonardus Sardinianus, Miguel Galan de Juana, Kirsten Robbins, Tanya P., Rowan, Roman Rosari, Cece Troya, Violet Fabiana, Adrienne Jackson, Maddie Reyes, Cody Miller, Juicebox08, Surika Nikulin, The Kimchi Witch, Cucumber, AFK Bard, Feeler, Ryro, Del Elliott, Charlotte, Daniel Prokop, Elizabeth Morgan, Madison Fife, Kale, Gabriella Day, Shido, Autumn Moore, Zetotron, Marie, Mysterious DG, Gary K, Sean O'Neill, Whitney Welts, Cooper, Mally Drew G,